He said he was looking for little girl. He said he was looking for little girl.
You're looking for little girl?
Yeah.
That's exactly what he said.
Weirding us out. I even have that part on.
Hey everyone, welcome back to my channel. I hope you're all doing super well. Thank you all so much for being here and for taking the time to listen to today's video. Today's case is honestly just heartbreaking, and it's just really sad because it's a case of senseless violence and death that could have been avoided. We're going to be talking about the stabbings that occurred on the Apple River in Wisconsin. A day that was supposed to be, nothing but fun in the sun turned into utter chaos, which led to severe injuries and even to death. The public has very split opinions about this case, about who's at fault, about who started it. It's honestly insane. I went into a deep hole digging into this case. I watched so many testimonies. I read so many court documents and just read so much of the online opinion about this, and it's just too much. Everyone is pointing fingers at each other and pointing fingers at other people and just criticizing those that were there the day of the incident. This case does involve a lot of people with very differing testimonies of what actually happened that day, and although there is video evidence capturing the moment, these injuries and this death occurred, it can still be very hard for people to form their opinion of who's right and who's wrong. I'm going to give you guys a couple of different point of views, from the defendant's perspectives, from what the prosecution's argument was, and the defense's, that way we can hear all the different versions and opinions of what actually happened that day. There is so much information to go over, so with that, let's jump right into it and let's talk about the Apple River stabbing. On July 30th, 2022, 52-year-old Nicolae Miu and his wife, 61-year-old Sondra Dee Miu, planned to spend the beautiful sunny day tubing at the Apple River in Somerset, Wisconsin with a group of friends. The Apple River is a roughly 70 or 80 mile long river in Wisconsin with somewhat gentle rapids and shallow waters that people take advantage of to go canoeing or tubing, and people go there to kind of just make a day out of it. To go have fun with your friends, to go tubing, to drink, and just hang out. So that's exactly what Nicolae and Sondra had planned. They packed up their things from their home in Lake Pryor, Minnesota, and made the hour or so drive up to the Apple River in Wisconsin. Before leaving the house, though, one of their friends that they were going to meet with, named Ernesto, called Nicolae and was like, hey, can you bring a knife with you? That way we can use it at the river to cut the twine that we use to tie the tubes together. So Nicolae was like, yes, of course, I will bring it, and he grabbed his pocket knife, and then him and Sondra were on their way at around 9:30 a.m. They got to the Apple River at around 10:45 a.m. and they met up with their friends. They said hi to everyone, set everything up, and then they began tubing on the Apple River. While they were tubing, one of Nicolae's group members named Ariel lost his phone in the water. His girlfriend just accidentally dropped the phone in the river, and even though it was inside a floater bag, which is a special bag that people use if they're going to a water park or to the ocean or something like that, where they're able to bring their phone, it's waterproof, and if it does get lost, it floats, that way you can see it and it doesn't sink to the bottom. So Ariel had his phone in a floater bag, but even with that, they still couldn't see where the phone was. Nicolae told him that he would help him look for his phone since he had snorkeling gear, so he was like, listen, let me grab my gear, I'm gonna look underwater and see if I can spot your phone. But Ariel told him hey, it's not that big of a deal, my phone has insurance, let's just move on. But Nicolae insisted and said that he would go look for it. So Nicolae took off his shirt, his hat, and his sunglasses, and he put on his snorkeling gear to begin looking in the river. Now, since the group didn't know exactly in what spot the phone was dropped at, Nicolae was just kind of looking everywhere. He was like, I really don't know where I'm supposed to look, so let me kind of just trace our steps, let me go back to the river where we already passed and just see if maybe the bag is there or if someone found the phone. So while looking around the river searching for the phone, Nicolae encountered a group of teenagers that were also tubing, and we're gonna call this group the teenager group. Now, this is where things get murky. From this moment on, there are a lot of different versions of what happened, but first, we'll talk about Nicolae's point of view of how things went down. Now, before we get into all of that, let's just briefly go back and talk about who Nicolae is. Nicolae Miu was born on December 11th, 1969 in Romania, and he immigrated to the United States when he was about 15 years old. He has a twin brother, and their upbringing was a little bit rough. In 1999, Nicolae and his twin brother filed a restraining order against their father because there were numerous instances of physical abuse at the hands of him. They were very afraid of their dad, and when the case went to court, Nicolae's father gave an an absurd story about how the KBG had a plot to get to him through his son, and he was just saying like all of these really out there statements. Their father ended up passing away 18 months later, and that was that. Nicolae continued on with his life. He worked as a mechanical engineer and had 2 bachelor degrees, one in engineering and one in mathematics. He was very active on Facebook, and he would share like different posts with these kind of like odd, captions. So for example, he had one post where he wrote, quote, "The entire world is a very confusing world latest. Boys dressing like girls, fake lips, fake boobs, fake food, fake everything." And then in another post he put, quote, "Boys using girls' bathrooms. Is that supposed to be our new? The stipple of freedom?" Along with, quote, "Men not respecting their women counterparts is because of a lack of upbringing is very concerning. Children not respecting their parents is also very concerning. And yes, not respecting God is the most concerning to me," end quote. He would also share these photos of weapons, and he made his love for the Second Amendment known with captions such as, quote, "Guns don't kill people, people kill people," end quote. In one Valentine's Day post, he thanked his wife for a gift that she got him, which was a handgun with ammo inside a heart-shaped box. His wife Sondra described him as a very peaceful and helpful guy who would help the neighbors out if they needed something, and he was just like a very handy person. He loved his wife, he loved their dog that they had together, and spent a lot of time with the dog. Now, he didn't have any children with his wife Sondra, but he did have a son from a previous marriage. He had divorced that ex-wife back in 2009, and then her and their son moved to Romania while Nicolae stayed in Minnesota. He ended up meeting Sondra at work and remarried in 2011. So yeah, that's a little bit about who Nicolae was. That's pretty much all I could find about him. There's a lot of people that just find his Facebook posts a little off-putting, kind of odd, and just like very bold. So yeah, I feel like you can just tell that Nicolae was like a very opinionated person. Now, let's go back to the day of the incident. According to Nicolae, he overheard the teenager group say that they had found a cell phone. So he approached them to ask if he could see the phone so he could identify it and confirm if that was Ariel's or not. So he says that at this moment when he approached the teenagers, they began calling him names and accusing him of being a child molester who was, quote, "looking for little girls," and they were basically calling him out for using the snorkeling gear in the water. Now, the reason they thought this is, again, because they thought it was weird that he was like using the snorkeling gear to look underwater, so they figured maybe he was trying to look at like the girls' legs or like, kind of just like creep on people under the water when he was just trying to look for his phone.
Did you hear yourself say he's a raper?
Yeah.
What was that all about?
He had said like a weird comment. That's kind of why I started recording in the first place. Like, because he was having his snorkel and it was like 2 feet deep water. So like, what are you doing? And then he just said like a weird comment, something about like some little girls. And then,
did you have any girls with you?
No, I did not have any girls in my group.
Did you see any other girls on the river near where you?
Yeah, there were some girls on the river.
Child age girls or
not that I saw, no.
Now, Nicolae was super confused. He was like, why are they calling me a child molester? Why are they being mean to me? Why are they insulting me? And in his mind, he was thinking, if I'm a child molester, then you shouldn't be drinking since you are underage, because he noticed that the group of teenagers appeared heavily under the influence. They actually grabbed his snorkeling gear, threw it into the water, they surrounded him, and continued calling him these terrible names.
Oh God! We up! We up! What are you talking about? Yeah. What the hell are you talking about?
Get away from us!
What?
What are you doing?
What's going on with y'all, homie? He's on camera.
Guys, let's
tripping. He's on 4K. Yo, the new iPhone got that good quality. What did you say? Yeah, what the hell? Who is this? Yes.
Nicolae said that he went after his gear, which began floating away, and that's when another group of adults that was nearby, separate from the teenagers that he was just encountering, also began approaching him and yelling at him, saying that he was also a child molester, and both of these separate groups began to surround him.
Culture! Who is that? What is the culture? Who is that? Who the hell is this? He's a little girl! It's said he was looking for a little girl.
You're looking for a little girl?
Yeah.
That's exactly what he said.
Weirded us out. I even have that part on camera.
Now we will call this second group the Carlson group. So just to refresh, we have Nicolae, who approached these teenagers on their tubes looking for a phone, and they began yelling at him, and they kind of had like an altercation going on. And then we have a separate group who does not know the teenager group and does not know Nicolae that is witnessing this altercation called the Carlson group, and they decided to get involved and kind of just like break up the altercation. So going back, Nicolae says that a woman from the Carlson group came up to him, hit him in the back of his head, and also smacked his right ear. During all of this chaos of being surrounded by people calling him names, pushing him, and approaching him, he was stumbling on the pebbles in the river, and he says that he was unable to walk right and was just like in complete confusion of what was going on. He was thinking to himself, what is happening? Like, why are these people being so mean to me? Why did they throw my snorkel gear into the water? Why are they pushing me? Why are they hitting me? Nicolae says that he had never experienced anything like this before and that he feared for his safety and for his health. The reason why he feared for his health is because a year and a half ago before this, Nicolae had quadruple bypass surgery, so he knew that his health was in fragile condition. Now, one of the teenagers tried to pull down Nicolae's swim trunks, and when Nicolae grabbed the boy to get his hands away from his trunks, he noticed that the boy had a knife. In fact, Nicolae said that he noticed two of the teenagers had knives. One was a small one and the other a larger one, and that they were pointing the knives at him. This is when Nicolae says that he truly began to fear for his life and said that he managed to take the arm of the teenager holding the smaller knife, bent it around towards him, and just kind of like poked him with the knife. Then he says that he grabbed the knife and then swung it around behind him, and he said that he didn't know if he hurt anyone with the knife, but that the reason he was swinging the knife around was as an act of self-defense because he again feared for his life since he was facing these two armed teenagers, and because all of the other people from the teenager group and the Carlson group began closing in around him. Now again, I just want to remind you guys that this is all of Nicolae's point of view of everything that he testified about in court. So after he kind of like swung around the knife and like poked back at the teenager with the knife, he says that he didn't remember anything other than when he began walking back to his own friend group and to his wife, his group asked him like, what just happened? Like, we saw you go look for the phone and then you kind of disappeared and then we heard all this chaos, like what happened? But Nicolae said that nothing happened, and he said that he felt like he just couldn't speak because he was so scared. He also didn't want to escalate things further since everyone was drinking and just like everyone's emotions were heightened, so he just didn't want to say what had happened. The only person not drinking in his group was his wife Sondra, who was a designated driver that day, but Nicolae didn't tell her anything. Nicolae also said that he was drinking as well, but that since he had his surgery, he didn't really drink hard liquor, so he wasn't like super drunk. After rejoining his group, one of his friends, Ernesto, came up to him and asked him if he ended up finding the cell phone. Again, that was the whole reason why Nicolae was over there anyways, because he was searching for his friend's phone. He said that he believes the group down the river found something, but that they wouldn't tell him what it was. So Ernesto was like, okay, but are you okay? Because you look a little bit flustered. And Nicolae said that he was fine, and again, he didn't want to tell his friend the truth and just didn't really want to talk about it. He said that he had like a locked jaw and was just extremely shocked about what had just occurred because this chaos and this incident literally happened in the blink of an eye, like in the span of only just a couple of minutes. He had no idea how things escalated and how things got just so chaotic when he was just trying to find his friend's phone. Shortly after this, he said that some of the women in his group noticed commotion up the river where these two groups that Nicolae encountered were, again, the teenagers and the Carlson group, and his friends were like, we're gonna call 911 because it looks like there's chaos happening up the river between these two different groups. Again, Nicolae didn't tell them like, oh, I know what the chaos is about, like they were calling me a child molester, etc. Like he just stayed quiet and just kind of wanted to forget about it, but then he noticed that the police had arrived and he thought that they were arresting the people in that group for fighting and for having weapons. So he figured that police would probably want to interview him about the incident because he was like a witness to it. So he and his group stayed around for a while to see if they would question him, but they never did. So that is what happened according to Nicolae and what he initially told police during his police interview after being arrested. Yes, after being arrested. Police ended up arresting Nicolae, and what I just explained is what Nicolae told Police Lieutenant Brandy Hart during his questioning. Now, let's talk about the police's perspective, of what they experienced that chaotic day. After police arrived at the lake and began speaking with the two groups, the teenagers and the Carlson group, they were told that an older male with gray hair, approximately 250 pounds, wearing a gold chain necklace, and who was Russian looking, stabbed people and then went back upriver and ran into the woods. The groups were asking for help after having dragged injured people to the shore. Police say that they saw that 5 people were severely injured and that rescuers began performing life-saving measures and began preparing to take these 5 victims to the hospital. Police started searching the area, to find this old gray-haired Russian-looking man, and at around 4:45 p.m., police spotted the man described to them and detained him. And this man was Nicolae. While Nicolae was sitting in the police car, he told St. Croix County Sheriff Scott Knudsen, quote, "I hear somebody got stabbed and I fit the description," end quote. After this, Nicolae was taken into custody and he was questioned by Lieutenant Brandy Hart. Brandy asked him if he had made any contact with anyone when he swung around the knife that he grabbed from one of the teenagers, and Nicolae said that he didn't remember. Brandy asked him if he had a knife that day and he said, quote, "No, absolutely no," end quote, and that he did have a knife earlier in the day when they initially arrived at the lake so that he could cut the twine to, tie the tubes together, but that he wasn't sure what he had done with the knife after that. He believes that maybe he kind of gave it to one of his friend groups or that he left it in his car upon arriving at the lake and after learning that the tube rental place had pre-cut string. So he was like, I don't know what happened to my knife. Like, I don't remember if I brought it down. I don't remember if I left it in the car. I don't remember if I gave it to one of my friends. Like, I have no idea. Again, he reiterated that maybe he put it back in the car, but that he truly does not remember what happened. And asked Brandy, can you tell me what happened? Like, what's going on? Now, Lieutenant Brandy said that she didn't have all the details yet, but that 4 people were severely injured and that 1 person had died. Nicolae responded to this news of a person's death and of all these injuries with, "Oh no," and asked if it was due to the Carlson group and the teenagers group fighting with each other or what had happened. And Brandy told him again that she didn't have all the details, to which Nicolae said, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God." And he put his hands over his head and just appeared extremely distressed with this news. During his initial questioning, he also agreed to do a DNA test and a physical examination by a nurse. So that was basically like a quick summary of what happened, when the police got there and during Nicolae's questioning. As for Nicolae's wife, Sondra, she was also questioned by police and she gave her version of what happened. She said that she saw the group of guys get off their tubes and began to hit Nicolae, so she screamed for help from Ariel and Ernesto, who were part of their friend groups, who then went running towards Nicolae, who at this time was already beginning to walk back to the group. So Ariel and Ernesto kind of missed the entire fight, like they got there right at the end when Nicolae was like done. Sondra said that all she heard was screaming and that she couldn't really see what was going on, and then she just saw Nicolae, Ariel, and Ernesto walking back together. When investigator Mitchell Sheppy asked Sondra if Nicolae usually had a weapon on him, she said that Nicolae did have a small pocket knife in his pocket that was actually clipped onto his pocket, so it was like stuck to him in a way. But then she added, quote, "Those guys grabbed it from him," end quote. And Nicolae also told her that they began swinging it at him, and that's when he grabbed it and moved away. Other than that, Nicolae only told her that the other group of people there were calling him a pedophile and that they were attacking him. She also said that when police got there, she saw someone getting CPR performed on them, but she thought that Nicolae couldn't have caused this. Like, he couldn't have been the one that caused all of these injuries or harmed anyone, because again, this whole incident happened in the span of under 5 minutes, a very short time. She was like, there's no way that Nicolae got there, was looking for the phone, had this altercation, and then 5 people ended up injured and 1 person dead when this all happened in a matter of minutes. So that's what Sondra's perspective was. Again, Nicolae says that 2 teenagers had a knife and that he grabbed one of their knives to like attack them, but then Sondra's saying like, no, Nicolae used his own pocket knife to attack them. So see how already we're getting like different different perspectives and like varying statements. That is literally what this case is made of. Like there are so many different perspectives and like sometimes they don't really match up, so it's just a lot. Now, at this time when Sondra and Nicolae were first questioned, they had no idea that there was a video that recorded nearly the entire altercation. So, the following day on July 31st, 2022, investigators obtained video showing the incident. Now, I'm going to include some clips of it here. Of course, not the graphic parts, because this video, it like breaks my heart. It makes me feel sick. It makes me feel so sad for everything that happened that day. It's just really, really chaotic. So I'm just going to include different clips of it, but they did show the entire, graphic video during the trial, which, you can watch online.
He hit a woman? He hit a woman? You hit a woman. He hit a woman. You hit him. What the fuck? He's dying. He's dying, bro. What? Oh my god. Oh my god. Oh my god. Are we serious? Is this real? Oh my god. Who is that? Oh my god. Oh my god! Is this real? Is this real? Oh my god! Oh my god, what the fuck? Is this real? Wait! That's not bike! That's not bike! That's not bike! That's not bike! That's not Isaac! Oh my god! Oh my god! This isn't real!
In this video, you can see that he clearly stabbed a couple of people. So with that, on August 1st, 2022, Nicolae was charged with first-degree intentional homicide and 4 counts of attempted first-degree intentional homicide. Like I mentioned earlier, one person did die as a result of this altercation and 4 others were severely injured. The person that passed away was 17-year-old Isaac Schumann. He was a member of the first group, of the teenagers, and unfortunately, he was stabbed during this altercation by Nicolae and he was dragged to shore where life-performing measures were performed, but he was ultimately declared dead at the hospital shortly after. Isaac was stabbed with great force in his torso, with these big wounds in his torso, his heart, and his chest, which caused him to nearly die instantly. It's so tragic that Isaac lost his life on a day that was supposed to be simple and fun. It was a beautiful, sunny day. Isaac was supposed to be having fun with his friends, but instead he was killed. My heart really just hurts for his family and for his loved ones. Like, it's so scary how things can escalate so quickly. Like, one minute he's tubing with his friends and the next minute he's gone. Isaac was going into his senior year, and according to his family, he was very smart, he loved golf, he loved math, and he was described as being very mature for his age, and he just had a forward-looking mentality that was uncommon for a high school junior. He was an honor student, he was preparing his college applications, and he was planning to study electrical engineering. He had his whole life ahead of him. He had this big future full of aspirations, and he even had this small business where he detailed cars and boats. There was a celebration of life for Isaac on August 3rd, 2022, where hundreds of people gathered and wore shirts that read Isaac Strong in orange letters, which was Isaac's favorite color. Golf clubs that Isaac recently purchased were also on display as well in memory of him. Many people spoke of Isaac through tears and through grief, and his brother Jake thanked his brother for, quote, the best 17 years of our life, and said that he hopes everyone keeps Isaac's spirit with them, and said that life is just too short, so answer a phone call, answer a text message, go see somebody. And he ended his speech with, Isaac, you're my best friend forever, and I love you more than you know. Isaac's mother also spoke out. Her name was Alina, and she said, quote, he is all that was good, kind, giving, and forgiving. He had a style all his own, an incredible work ethic, and a smile he shared equally. I know Isaac can't come back to me physically, but with his spirit, I will always feel him with me. I pray every day that he will guide me to forgive me, to have his kindness, have his tender heart, and the generous spirit of love and patience, end quote. As for his father, Scott, he said that he was just in shock after this whole thing and said that Isaac was just just a very respectful, courteous, kind, compassionate, and an amazing person who was loved by so many. They just couldn't believe that this happened. Again, their son was like, I'm gonna go tubing with my friends and it's gonna be a beautiful, sunny day. And then they ended up getting a phone call that their son is dead. Isaac also had a girlfriend who just was not able to speak at this memorial, so she gave her godmother a statement to read on her behalf, as well as other of Isaac's classmates and friends, and his high school principal even spoke out, and he said that he was offering his help to all the students to get through this. Candles were lit in honor of Isaac, and it was just an incredibly sad day for the community. I just hope that Isaac is resting peacefully and that his family has the support to cope with the loss of their loved one. It's just really sad. I mean, he was only 17 years old, you guys. Like, that is so incredibly young, and we're gonna touch a little bit more about what happened to him in a little bit and how his death actually went down. Now, the 4 other people who were severely injured were 22-year-old AJ Martin, 20-year-old Dante Carlson, his brother Anthony Carlson, and then 24-year-old Riley Madison. They were airlifted and driven by ambulances to the hospital after the incident and had spent so many days in the hospital undergoing surgeries and recovering from these very severe injuries. Now, this all happened in 2022, and it took almost 2 years for Nicolae's trial to begin. His trial began on April 1st, 2024, so this is very recent. I didn't even know that this had happened in 2022. Like, I don't really remember hearing about it on the news. The only reason I now know about it is because of how big this trial was and how just there was so much evidence and testimonies presented and just so much information to go over. Like I mentioned at the start of the video, it seems like everyone's memory was kind of foggy that day and had varying statements from their initial questioning by police to their statements during the trial. But I'm going to do my best to kind of like break down the key points for you guys because this is a very lengthy trial, and if I go over like every point, like we're going to be here for hours. So I'm going to link a couple of videos for the trial down below if you guys want to go watch them later and kind of just do like some more research. So let's get into this trial. First, the prosecution, Carl Anderson and Brian Smested, gave their opening statements to the jury, where their main argument was that Nicolae was the only aggressor and had plenty of opportunities to walk away after the group of teenagers began taunting him, but he didn't. He chose to escalate the situation by punching a woman who had tried telling him to walk away, and didn't walk away until after stabbing 5 people. Carl Anderson told the jury that they will hear Nicolae try to claim that he acted only in self-defense, but in the video evidence, they will see what actually happened and hear how multiple times the teenager group told Nicolae to go away very clearly. Joanne Cockfield, who belonged to Isaac's group, the teenager, actually filmed 2 videos of the entire incident. So he's the one that basically created this huge piece of evidence for the trial. One of the videos he recorded of the incident was only a 9-second video where you can hear the group say that Nicolae is looking for little girls, and you can also hear the teenager saying that he's a rapist. Then in this video, you can see Nicolae walk away from them.
What is he on? Whoa! 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 Get away! Oh God! We up! We up! What are you talking about? What the hell are you talking about? What?
Get away from us!
What?
What are you doing?
What's going on with y'all homie? He's on camera.
Guys, let's
Scripting. He's on 4K. Yo, the new iPhone got that good quality. What do you say?
So that 9-second video ends, and then Joanne begins recording another video which is 3 minutes and 23 seconds long. In this long video, this is where you can see just a lot more of what actually happened. You can see Joanne walking up to the group, and the prosecution pointed out that Nicolae is clearly touching his pocket where his knife is. He then just runs up to the group who are just sitting in their tubes. Nicolae stands in front of this group of teenagers. He puts his snorkel gear in his mouth to hold it while he reaches for the tubes that the boys are on to kind of look for his friend's phone. And the boys begin screaming at him like, whoa, whoa, what's going on? And then that's when Nicolae drops his snorkel gear from his mouth, which, if you recall, Nicolae initially told Lieutenant Brandy Hart that the teenagers took his snorkel from him and threw it in the water. But in this video footage, you can clearly see that his snorkel just falls out of his mouth and just falls by itself. So after the snorkel falls, Nicolae walks away and kind of begins looking for his snorkeling gear. And the boys continue to tell him that he needs to leave, to get away, that he's a pedo, and just all these other insults. At this point, the boys are shouting really loud, like these intense names, and just telling him to leave. So this is when the Carlson group, who was nearby, hears the boys trying to get this guy away from them. So a couple of members from the Carlson group begin walking over to help, and one of their members, Madison and Dante, are the first ones up. Madison walks up to Nicolae and is telling him to leave leave these teenagers alone, and Nicolae tells her that they took his snorkel gear, but she just kind of ignores that and just keeps telling him to go away, and is kind of pointing at him to walk back to his own group. Then Nicolae looks back to the boys, and then Madison kind of touches him to get him to face her again, and this is when Nicolae turns around and Madison tells him again to leave. Nicolae just pretty much ignores Madison and just kind of smiles at his group who is down in the river, and he lifts his arm up in the air to kind of motion of like, hey, we're all good. Now, at this point, more members of the Carlson group approach Nicolae, which now includes Riley Madison, and the teenage boys are still screaming names at him, and Madison and Riley are yelling at Nicolae to just leave the situation. Clearly things have escalated at this point. Clearly things are getting out of control, so they're just like, bro, leave, go back to your group, get out of here. Now, when Madison and Riley are telling him to leave, this is when in the video you can see Nicolae reach for his pocket knife. His hands begin moving in front of his waist, and he takes out his knife. At this time, the prosecution told the jury that it's not shown in the video where Nicolae lets people know that he has a knife. It's not like he's like, hey guys, back up, I have a knife, I have a weapon, give me some space. He doesn't let people know that he has this weapon on him, and that's something that the prosecution feels is a big deal, because it's not like he tried to warn people. He doesn't try to take a step back or anything. He just doesn't want the people to know that he has this weapon.
And you didn't hold it up and say, hey, I have a knife, right?
To me, that would be a threat.
Well, I'm not asking you that. You did not hold it up.
No.
And you didn't, in fact, you held it down by your side, right?
Objection, asked and answered.
Overruled. Isn't that what you did?
Yes,
You didn't take a step back and brandish it and say, hey, back up, I have a knife, right?
correct.
You opened it down low, and then you held it down low by your side, right?
Correct.
Instead, you can see him just holding the knife discreetly down below by his side. The prosecution also told the jury to take note that Madison was wearing sunglasses when she first approached Nicolae. However, there's one point in the video where the cameraman, Jawan, turns around back to the teenage boys who are still yelling at Nicolae to go away and just calling him names. But then all of a sudden, you can see the demeanor of these teenagers change. At first they were go away, they were kind of laughing in a way, and then all of a sudden they're they all just looked really shocked. And the reason why is because off camera, Nicolae punched Madison in the face. Now, the reason why the prosecution knows that this happened is because, of course, the witnesses, but then also because when Jawan turns the camera back to Nicolae and Madison, you can see that Madison is no longer wearing her sunglasses because they fell off after Nicolae hit her. Now, after seeing Nicolae hit a girl, Dante, again, one of the members from the Carlson group, steps in and he punches Nicolae, who then falls into the water and is slapped as he's still down in the water. Nicolae tries to get back up, and that's when another member of the Carlson group named AJ Martin tries to push Nicolae down by pushing on his shoulders. Well, Nicolae didn't stay down, and he actually got back up, he extended his arm, and he literally stabbed AJ in the lower stomach.
Well, after he had hit Maddie in the face, I saw someone else hit him, and I wasn't sure who. I saw him fall into the water, and my intention was, because I used to work at elementary schools and had experience breaking up fights with little kids and stuff like that, so my intention was to go over there and try and break it up. I saw him in the water, and I saw people going around him, so I went to push his shoulder in the front, but ultimately didn't. But I was going to try and just get him to stay down for another second and then tell everyone to back up, and then we could have figured out what was going on. But as I reached down to push him in the shoulders, he reached up and I guess, I don't know if you call it a stab, but got me with the knife.
It's crazy. Like, you can see the full video. I don't think I can include that part here, but like watching the video, like it all happened in like, I can't even describe how quickly. Like, it was literally so quick. Like, Nicolae gets up from the water and he just goes like that, like literally cutting AJ from his lower stomach, like all the way up. Now, it seems like AJ didn't really notice in the moment that this happened. Of course, like his adrenaline was running and like all this stuff was so chaotic. So after getting initially stabbed in the stomach, AJ continues to push Nicolae away, which means that as Nicolae is like falling back after getting pushed, the knife just goes like straight up. So the knife literally went from like AJ's abdomen all the way up to like kind of above his ribs, and it almost literally hit his chin, but he actually missed his chin, and that would have been even more severe if he had cut his chin open. So Nicolae does this huge stabbing motion and then he falls back down from AJ's push, and as he's getting up, it appears that he's trying to like grab on to Anthony Carlson's like swim trunks, which again is from the Carlson group, but he's not able to grab onto the shorts, and he ends up stabbing Riley as he gets up off camera. Again, Riley is from the Carlson group and she was there to kind of just like de-escalate, and I guess she was like yelling at Nicolae a little bit more, and so when Nicolae was able to get up, he just like stabbed Riley like where her rib cage is. And you can see Nicolae with his knife in his hand in a stabbing position. Again, this part happened off camera. Like, you know, at this point, Jawan's camera motions are getting very shaky because like AJ just got stabbed, people are being pushed in the water, a girl just got hit, so the camera motion isn't like super stable. But when Jawan points the camera over to Riley, you can literally see her bleeding from like her rib cage, and you can just see Nicolae standing there with the knife in his hand. It's bloody. So you know, putting two and two together, the prosecution is like, at that point he just stabbed Riley for no reason. At this point, he has now stabbed two people, and his group, you know, his friend group and his wife are down the river like listening to this commotion, and they're just wondering like, what the heck is going on? So that is when Nicolae's friend Ariel, who's the one that lost his phone, approached the scene to kind of help out his friend Nicolae and just kind of see what was going on. So as Ariel is approaching the scene, Nicolae turns around to face Anthony, which is again one of the members from the Carlson group, and he literally just extends his arm twice and just stabs him. Like, it's like so quick, like the video is insane. The first time he extended the knife, Anthony only got surface scratches from the knife, but then the second time, Nicolae did stab him. After this, like after witnessing just 3 people get stabbed, this is when Isaac, who is unfortunately the one that passed away from this, decides to intervene. Now, Isaac is the one wearing this white baseball cap, so if you end up watching the video, like that's how you can kind of follow what he was doing. Isaac just quickly pushes his hands on Nicolae and just pushes Nicolae out of frustration, because at this point, like Nicolae is just going on a stabbing spree. So he pushes him, and as Isaac pushes him, Nicolae stabs Isaac. After stabbing him, Nicolae just kind of stumbles back a bit, and you can see the knife bloody in his hand. Nicolae ends up stumbling next to his friend Ariel and then lunges once more to stab again, and this time he stabs Dante. Then Nicolae just walks away. I know, it's just absolutely shocking. Like, how did this escalate so much? It's just, all of this happened in under like 4 minutes. I get that Nicolae's adrenaline was probably like pumping at this point because, again, this was all just crazy, but the fact that he just walked away is insane. Like, did he not realize that he stabbed all these people? Did he not realize like the severity of what he had just done? So that is the video footage that captures all of this, and the prosecution was like, this is like our big piece of evidence. Like, jury, just look at this. You can clearly see that Nicolae did this, and he's the one that stabbed and, you know, killed Isaac. Prosecutor Carl Anderson said that in the span of when Nicolae punched Madison and knocked her sunglasses off her face to when he walks away from stabbing 5 people, only 25 seconds had passed. 25 seconds. Like, that's how this all escalated. In just 25 seconds, 5 people were stabbed and 1 person was dead. So after Nicolae walks away, this is when people started to realize what actually happened. Because again, it all happened so fast. So at first, you know, the teenager group and the Carlson group thought that Nicolae was just like punching people, but a lot of them didn't really realize that he had stabbed people until they saw AJ and Isaac collapsed in the water. The water around them began to turn red. You can hear Jawan in the video, as well as some other friends being like, oh my god, he's dying, because you can see AJ literally in the water, like holding his stomach, like holding his injuries, basically holding in his guts. And then you can see Isaac's, you know, white baseball cap just floating in the water, and everything is red, and it's just crazy. A lot of people have actually judged Jawan as well as the other teenagers during this moment, because like one of the teenagers is like, oh my god, they're dying, and Jawan and the friends like run away instead of going towards AJ to help him. Like basically AJ was like left in the water by himself. Like if you watch the video, like he's there holding his like stomach in to like prevent his guts from falling out, and no one goes to help him right away. Everyone's just like, what the heck? And they like run away. So a lot of people just feel like Jawan and like, you know, the other teenagers were not, I guess you could describe it like not being respectful. Like they feel like Jawan and the teenagers were just like not smart for recording the video and like instigating Nicolae even more, and that they weren't even taking it seriously. Like they continued to film and were just like screaming instead of like figuring it out. Anyways, going back to the video, you can see people begin getting the injured to the shore, and then you can see Nicolae walking off into the distance back to his own group down the river. Prosecutor Carl told the jury that they will hear what happened from the victims, but unfortunately, Isaac won't be able to tell his story since he was sadly killed nearly instantly after being stabbed. Other people in the river arrived to help the injured until paramedics arrived, and it was just a very chaotic scene. Carl says that after Nicolae returned to his group, he told them, quote, "They took my knife," and didn't call 911 or tell his group that he had literally just stabbed 5 other people. Other people in his group did call 911 because they were like, I mean, something clearly is happening. But again, Nicolae said that he didn't think they needed to do that. Now, some people give Nicolae kind of like the benefit of the doubt because they're like, okay, like again, this all happened in like 25 seconds when he stabbed 5 people and killed Isaac. So maybe the adrenaline was pumping in him. Maybe his vision just got blurry in that moment. His mind just got blocked. So that's why when he walked back to his friend group, he didn't tell them like, hey, I just stabbed 5 people, because his mind just like immediately like went blank. So that could be why he didn't say anything, or it could also be that he just didn't want to admit what he had just done and was kind of in his own mind trying to forget it. In the opening statement, prosecutor Carl also told the jury that one person from Nicolae's group named Gilma testified and told police that she saw Nicolae throw something onto the shore before walking back up the river to meet with them. And when police went to go look, you know, over by the shore, that is where they ended up finding his pocket knife, and they tested it and it came back positive to the DNA of those who were stabbed. So the teenagers didn't take his knife. You know, Nicolae is telling his friends like, hey, they took my knife. He's telling police like, I don't know what happened to my knife, when clearly the witness saw him throw the knife to the side, and when police went to the side to go look for it, they found it. So clearly Nicolae was trying to get rid of it. Shortly after this, Nicolae told his group that they should just kind of head to the exit of the river and call it a day. You know, pack everything up and head home and just kind of like move on. When police arrived and were told what happened by the 2 groups, everyone was just so frantic and no one knew where Nicolae was. But when Jawan told police that he had a video of nearly the entire incident and showed police what Nicolae looked like, the police were like, perfect, we're gonna go find him. So police went to the exit of the river to kind of see if they could spot Nicolae. And as they were doing that, they actually walked past him but didn't recognize him because Nicolae was now wearing a hat, he was wearing sunglasses, and he was wearing a jacket. So they at first didn't recognize Nicolae until a little bit later when they finally like spotted him and identified him, and that's when they detained him. Again, I've already told you guys like what Nicolae's perspective was of what he told police when he was first detained. Now remember, from Nicolae's perspective, he says that he decided to stick around because he thought police were going to question him and his friends as witnesses about the fight that happened between the teenagers and the Carlson group. So he said that he really was just like waiting around to talk to police and like, you know, give them what they needed. However, on the police's perspective, they say that when he did see police walk right in front of him, he didn't stop them and say, hey, I was here, like I just witnessed what happened, maybe I can help or anything. So again, different points of views. You know, police are like, it didn't look like he wanted to speak to us. It didn't look like he was seeking us out. But Nicolae's perspective is like, no, I was looking for them. I was trying to speak to them. So again, with this, you know, testimony being presented in the trial, it just didn't really paint a good picture of Nicolae trying to help. It honestly made it seem like he was trying to hide and kind of like go undercover by putting his sunglasses and his hat on. So the prosecution also brings up what Nicolae said after he was detained. Remember, he had told Lieutenant Brandy that he acted in self-defense because 2 of the teenagers had knives, a small and a big one, and that he didn't have a knife on him, that the teens took his snorkels, etc. But again, when Nicolae was saying this, he didn't know that there was video evidence showing kind of the complete opposite of what he was saying. So, you know, the prosecution was really using his first statement to the police as a huge piece of evidence to show like, look, Nicolae is clearly lying. He is saying that 2 teenagers had knives. We don't believe that anyone in the group had weapons or knives on them. And in the video, you don't see any of the teenagers pull out any knives. In fact, the only person you see pull out a knife is Nicolae. And you can also see in the video how the teenagers don't take his snorkel gear and throw it in the water. So again, this video was just like a huge piece of evidence and the prosecution was using it in their favor. Prosecutor Carl also told the jury that the deaths that day were, quote, senseless and horrific acts of violence when all Nicolae had to do was walk away, end quote. So I know that was a lot. There are so many people involved in this case, so many videos, so many witness testimonies. I hope I'm not making this confusing for you. I just wanted to give you guys like Nicolae's point of view of what happened that day, of what he told police, of what he, saw and experienced. Then I wanted to give you guys the police's perspective, the teenager's perspective, which we'll get into in a little bit, and then now what the prosecution is telling the jury during the trial. So I hope I'm not making it confusing. If I did, please let me know in the comments. Now that we spoke about what the prosecution was saying, let's go over what Nicolae's defense team was saying. His defense lawyers were Aaron and Corey. Now, the defense's main argument was that Nicolae was scared for his life and that he acted in self-defense after being surrounded by a group of drunk and aggressive teenagers who were calling him names and just getting into his personal space. That those teenagers were yelling, that they were looking for a crowd, that they were looking for attention by telling lies, and that they got it. They got the attention of the Carlson group, who then came over and intervened and then escalated the situation even more. His defense team said that Nicolae thought that the members of the Carlson group were approaching him to help him, that the Carlson group people were gonna come and be like, hey teenagers, leave this old guy alone, let him just find his friend's phone and move on. But that's obviously not what happened, and that when he saw that the Carlson group was siding with the teenagers, he grew even more scared, because now he not only was up against this group of teenagers, but he was also up against this other entirely separate group. His defense attorney Aaron said that this group pushed a grown man into the water, and while he was in the water, Dante Carlson slapped him while holding a beer in his hand. His defense team just really wanted to emphasize how drunk these people were. The defense lawyer Aaron also goes on to say that AJ Martin can see this old man lying in the water, and that instead of trying to go help him and get him up and just help this old, sick man, AJ instead just goes to push him down and just shoves him. Aaron adds on to this and tells the jury that he's briefly going to tell them who Nicolae is. That way they can get to know him on a more personal level. So he pretty much goes on to say everything that I've already told you from the start, that Nicolae is a son of an immigrant, that he's a married man, that he's a father, that he's a smart guy who speaks 5 languages, with English being his 5th, that he furthers his education, and that he now works in mechanical education. They really just wanted the jury to understand that Nicolae was a simple man, a married man, a father who was just trying to have a great summer day at the lake with his friends, and that it was supposed to be only that, a fun day in the sun, but that the only reason that he brought the knife is because his friend Ernesto, knows that he's a handy man and asked him to bring it so that they could cut the twine to tie the tubes together. That's the only reason. They didn't want the jury to think that he was this evil guy who planned on stabbing people and brought this knife because he planned on doing this. The defense attorney Aaron goes on to say that these teens could have easily walked away from Nicolae and stopped heckling him and insulting him and putting their phone in his face and everything, but that no, they didn't walk away. Instead, what they did was tell Nicolae, you've got 10 seconds, and then they threatened an old man who was already walking away to look for his snorkel gear that fell into the water. Aaron also told the jury that the video that they're going to watch is from Jawan's point of view, it's his perspective of what he captured, but that they're not able to look at Nicolae's point of view because it wasn't recorded, and he's the one who was being surrounded by drunk teenagers and was feeling unsafe. Aaron tells them to think of what someone not in Jawan's position but in Nicolae's position would do. Jawan was recording it amongst his other friends, but Nicolae was all alone away from his group, and he was, again, not against just one group of these teenagers, he was also against the Carlson group. What's interesting is that one person from the Carlson group named Quentin Carlson actually testified and said, quote, "I was worried about the group against one guy. I was worried that they were going to gang up on him and something bad was going to happen to the old guy. So I told my sons, Anthony and Dante, to go make sure that they don't attack that old guy." That's why, Anthony and Dante originally went there, because their dad told him like, hey, go like make sure this old guy isn't being attacked by these teenagers. The defense lawyer also said that in the video when you can see Nicolae and Madison talking to each other, which again, Madison is the one who had the sunglasses on and then was punched by Nicolae. Nicolae had turned around and had waved to his group down the river and was like, hey, I'm all good. And that's when Madison and the rest of the group, should have realized like, hey, he's not here completely alone. Like his friend group is down there, and they should have just let him go, opened up the circle that they had surrounded him in to let him go back to his group. But they didn't do that. Instead, they continued closing in on Nicolae and basically did not let him get through to leave, even though they were telling him to walk away, but they didn't give him space to walk away. Again, that's what the defense team was arguing. They were basically saying that Madison and the teenager group basically held Nicolae inside and prevented him from leaving. Now, as for how the defense team is explaining why Nicolae pulled out his knife, they basically said that, again, Nicolae feared for his safety, that he was getting more scared and more confused by why all these people were surrounding him, and that he just casually reached for his pocket and then realized that his knife was in it. So because he was so scared, he took it out and just simply held it down by his side to protect himself. The defense team was like, it's not like he was trying to hide the knife or anything like that. Like he was holding it there. Like if someone was looking, they could have seen it. Now, speaking of Madison, Nicolae's defense lawyer, Aaron, claims that Madison was pushed, not punched, like the prosecution claims. The defense added that Madison herself testified that Nicolae punched her with his right hand, but his knife was in his right hand, so how could he do both? They're basically like, how could he punch her with his right hand when his knife was in there? Like if that had happened, she would have been injured even more because he had a knife in his hand. They also added that there was no mark on her when she spoke to police later, as evident through the officer's body cam footage. So if she had been punched, they're saying there would have been a mark on her face. Again, everyone said something different. Some people were testifying saying that it was more of a slap. Some people were saying that no, it was a direct punch. Other people say it was a swift motion. Some people said that it was with his left hand, that it was with his right hand. Some people even said that he pulled her hair. I mean, again, it was all just such different statements. Anyways, as for, when the stabbings occur, his lawyer said that, again, he did it in self-defense and that he just did some quick jabs, that he could hear people yelling, but that he just wanted to get away from them for his own safety. So that's why he walked away instead of sticking around to see the extent of the injuries that his jabs caused. Lastly, his defense team said that yes, Nicolae lied during his initial questioning by police about having the knife on him, but that it was only because he was in shock. All of this craziness had just happened, so his mind just wasn't thinking clearly. They also added that, yeah, tossing the knife onto the shore wasn't the best decision, but that in that moment, Nicolae finally stopped getting attacked by the angry mob, that he was walking away in shock, that he just simply wanted to get back to his group and just wanted nothing to do with the knife, so he tossed it away. They really just reiterated that Nicolae was in serious shock and trauma at that time, so that's why he made that decision to hide the knife. Now, the defense team did have Nicolae's group testify, and they did say that he did look really pale, that he looked shocked, and he looked scared when he returned to the group. Now, to explain why Nicolae was wearing sunglasses, a jacket, and a hat after this happened, because again, the prosecution, were saying he was basically trying to hide from police because he put on this disguise. But the defense team was like, no, he wasn't trying to wear a disguise. He just simply put on his clothes that he was wearing when he first arrived at the lake. There really was no other deep-rooted reason as to why he just put his clothes back on. It's simply because he was done tubing and just wanted to get dressed and leave. The defense lawyer Aaron told the jury that this case ultimately comes down to reasonableness from him acting in self-defense. So again, I know that was a lot, but that was the defense's opening argument. Again, I really just wanted to give you guys a thorough summary of what both sides said. That way you guys can hear what the jury was told and how the prosecution and the defense's statements ultimately contributed to the verdict. Now, there was a lot of public division and a lot of public opinion when it came to this. Some people thought that Nicolae was just innocent, that he was simply acting acting in self-defense, but others felt like he escalated the situation and that he shouldn't have stabbed anyone, that he could have just walked away at any moment, that, these teenagers didn't have weapons, these, the Carlson group people didn't have weapons, so he could have just walked away and that was it. But other people feel like, he was up against all these people, maybe he did actually fear for his life, maybe he did think someone had a weapon, and that's why he did what he did. Now, during the trial, there were testimonies from more than 36 people, so obviously I can't get into all the details with everyone's testimony, otherwise this video could be hours long, but I will do my best to summarize the key ones. Let's start off by talking about Dante Carlson. Now, he testified that his dad, Quentin Carlson, sent him and his brother Anthony to the teenager group to see what was going on. He said that he punched Nicolae after seeing him punch Madison and said, "You never hit a woman." And because he punched Nicolae, he was stabbed in his abdomen and chest area after. The defense team disputed Dante's claims that he had only drank 2 beers that day with a test from the hospital hours after. His blood alcohol content level was 0.119, which is more than twice the legal limit in Wisconsin. Now, when Dante was first asked about what happened, again, he was under a lot of painkillers and stuff like that because he was being transported to the hospital because he had been stabbed. And he told police that the reason why he punched Nicolae is because he saw that Nicolae had punched Riley, which again, as we know, was not true. Nicolae punched Madison, he never punched Riley, he only stabbed her. But again, that is what he initially told police. So the defense team was using this against Dante. They were like, how can we trust your testimony when, first of all, you thought that Riley was punched, not Madison? So if you got that wrong, what else are you getting wrong? And Dante was like, well, I was under a lot of painkillers on the way to the hospital. I made that mistake, but I know what I saw. But again, the defense team was just going in on him, and they also reiterated that other people in this incident were also intoxicated by alcohol, that they were high on weed or both, and that the jury should take all of that into consideration since these witnesses' ability to recall accurate facts could not be seen as credible. So now let's move over from Dante's testimony and let's talk about what his brother, Anthony Carlson, said on the stand. Now, he said that he didn't see Nicolae punch Madison and he didn't see his brother hit Nicolae, but he did hear his brother scream, "You don't ever hit a woman." He also said that he was just really there to try to de-escalate the situation when all of a sudden he got stabbed in the torso, even though he was trying to help calm things down. The defense team really pressed Anthony because he had a history of having seizures, which can impact your memory, and when Anthony initially spoke to police, he did tell them that he had been blanking out a lot. So the defense team was kind of using that in their favor. They were like, listen, you have a history of seizures, you told police when you were first questioned that you had been blanking out. How do we know that what you're saying is accurate? Maybe you blanked out and you don't really remember things, as you're saying it. But Anthony defended himself and he said that he was only blanking out because he was helping his friend AJ, hold his intestines in after he was stabbed by Nicolae. So of course that just sent him into a, complete state of shock. Now, after Anthony, it was now Riley's turn to testify. She was stabbed and she suffered a punctured lung and her diaphragm and her stomach were badly damaged. She had to be resuscitated when she got to the hospital and she also had to undergo emergency surgery. She told prosecutors that she consumed alcohol and she smoked marijuana that day, but that she remembers being wounded by Nicolae. She said, quote, "I remember Nick's face and not lunging at me, but poking me. I looked down, I was bleeding. It didn't feel real. It was a lot of shock. I felt like I was dying. I was losing so much blood, and every time I walked, I felt like I was getting weaker and weaker." End quote. Prosecutor Carl Anderson showed the jury images of her wounds and of her lying on the riverbank injured, and Riley just broke into tears on the stand, looking at these photos and just having to relive this incredibly traumatic experience. As for how the defense was handling her testimony, Erin Nelson questioned her about past interviews where she said that she didn't really remember a lot of what happened because she did drink a lot that day, and about another interview where she said that she wasn't sure if Nicolae slapped or punched Madison. And again, everyone understands this was such a traumatic situation, so of course sometimes your memory might get a little bit blurry, but it's also hard to have that be as an excuse when someone's life is on the line, because Nicolae's future depends on these witness testimonies. So if people are saying, I don't really remember what happened, or I was, my mind was blurry at that time, or my memory is a little bit foggy, it's kind of, a serious situation because those memories are so important to determine, again, Nicolae's future. So now let's move over and let's talk about AJ Martin's testimony. testimony. AJ said that again, he stepped in to stop the fight and to try to keep Nicolae down after he had punched Madison. Nicolae's defense asked him if it was reasonable for Nicolae to think that he was being attacked on him based off of that, because again, AJ was trying to push him down. And AJ said, quote, "I wasn't attacking him. I tried to keep him down with my arms, yes, and then I was going to tell everyone to back up and give him some space. It was shallow. His head wasn't going below," end quote. Again, as we know, AJ was stabbed in the stomach after trying to get Nicolae to stay down in the water. His wounds were really severe. Like, again, the video of him just like holding in his stomach and holding everything together is just so intense and so frightening. Again, this all happened in a matter of seconds. Like, 1 second AJ's trying to like keep this man down and like de-escalate, and then in another second he's over there holding in his own intestines and trying to, stay awake and stay alert and stay alive. AJ says that he does kind of remember what happened, that he just remembers like using one hand to like scoop up his intestines and like scoop everything up, and then using his other hand to get him up out of the water because obviously like he needed to get to shore to get help, and that he remembers while he was waiting for the paramedics to get there, he kept saying like, "I'm gonna die, I'm gonna die." His friend Anthony, I believe, was trying to calm him down and was like, "No, you're gonna be okay, you're gonna be okay." But AJ's like, "I knew the severity of the situation. Like, I was literally holding my intestines. Like, in what world do you survive that?" So he says that after the paramedics got there, things got a little bit blurry, and the next thing he remembers was waking up in the hospital after his surgery with his parents there waiting for him.
I mean, I was still conscious. I was talking, but after that, really, all I remember is that, and then telling Tony that I was gonna die, and him telling me I was gonna be fine, and that I wasn't. And my response every time was, like 100%, I'm going to die today. And then I remember waking up in the hospital with a breathing tube and my parents looking at me.
He was in the hospital for 27 days and he had to have a feeding tube because his intestine had a hematoma, and he also lost about 50 pounds during this hospital stay. So again, his injuries were extremely severe, and he's saying that he was just trying to de-escalate the situation, but Nicolae's defense team went in to kind of like attempt to create gaps in his memory and just kind of weaken his testimony. Defense attorney Aaron Nelson said that AJ initially told police he thought he saw, quote, "the black guy," referring to Jawan, who was recording, hit Nicolae. He also said that he saw Madison get her hair pulled by Nicolae. He doesn't know if he mistakenly saw Madison get punched through the commotion and only saw her hair moving as a result of the punch. So again, he's also kind of had some differing statements, and the defense team was, using that to their defense. To all of this, AJ said that yes, like he was under the influence of pain medication when he initially spoke to police, but now that he's off the medication and now that he's better after, all of his injuries, he remembers everything very clearly. So moving on from AJ's testimony, let's now talk about Madison's testimony. Again, she is the one that was wearing the black bathing suit, who was wearing the sunglasses and was punched by Nicolae. Now, she actually requested to be off audio and video, but the transcript of her testimony was released. This was one of the most important testimonies, since basically the biggest question to everyone was who started it, because everything kind of escalated from the moment that Madison was punched. So in her testimony, Madison said that she confronted Nicolae and that he hit her on the left side of her face with a left hook, but the defense asked her how that was humanly possible, and she said, quote, "I actually do get my lefts and rights mixed up a little bit," end quote. She didn't demonstrate what she was saying because, again, this was off audio, off visuals, so how her statement was read could have left the jury very confused. She also went on to say that she didn't yank or shove Nicolae, which contradicts Nicolae's defense, saying that Nicolae only pushed her as a self-defense act because she had put her hands on him first. Now, this key moment that can sway the jury one way or another is not captured on camera. So the testimonies from the victims are what the jury can go off of for this exact moment, and the testimony of the other victims reinforce it even without video evidence of that exact moment. Like, there are witnesses that are like, no, like she was hit by Nicolae. So again, there were so many people that testified, but one of the most important, testimonies was that of Nicolae's. During his questioning, Nicolae initially claimed that he had put his knife back in the car after cutting the twine to tie the tubes together, and that if it wasn't in his car, then he really had no idea what happened to his knife. Well, the prosecutor highlighted, however, that the owner of the tube rental sells pre-cut rope, so bringing a knife was basically unnecessary. The prosecutors also argued that Nicolae should have known that the phone he went looking for would be floating since it was in a floating bag, making it easier to find without snorkel gear. They also brought up how Nicolae was searching in the wrong direction according to the river current. However, to all of this, Nicolae said that he searched all areas of the river since he didn't know where or at what point the phone had fallen. And the reason he had his snorkel gear is, what I already mentioned at the beginning, is because he was like, maybe the phone did accidentally fall to the bottom of the river, maybe the floater bag didn't work, so that's why he wanted to use his gear to find it. The prosecution said that when he was getting ready to snorkel, he took off his hat, his shirt, and left the knife in his pocket on purpose. So anyways, they moved on from that point, and then the prosecution was talking about why he continued to have the knife in his pocket even after tying the tubes together and even after setting everything up. There really was no need for him to have the knife anymore, and they added you took off your shirt, you took off your hat, you took off everything, basically just were in your swim trunks to go tubing. Why didn't you also leave your knife behind? Why did you keep that on you on purpose? And to that, Nicolae responded and said hey, I simply forgot that my knife was in my pocket. But the prosecutors went back to him and were like, no, you knew it was in your pocket because in the video you can clearly see yourself searching for it and reaching for it. The prosecution also questioned him on why he just didn't simply walk away after the teenagers made it clear that they did not want to be near him, and Nicolae said that that wasn't true, that the group of teenagers asked him what he was looking for and he thought that they were a polite group, and he told them hey, I'm looking for my friend's phone, and that's why he stayed for as long as he did. Now let's talk about Nicolae being questioned by the defense. Nicolae explained that when approached by the adults, including Madison, he attempted to explain himself and the situation, but that they continued to shout and insult him. So he says that feeling frustrated, he turned away from the tubing groups, and when Madison grabbed his arm, he reacted out of fear by reaching for his pocket knife. He clarified that he only pushed Madison away to protect his personal space and did not intend to hurt her or, do anything bad to her. He also said that he felt like he was being threatened as he was being struck in the head and pushed into the water. He was slapped and, all these things happened to him, which of course made him fear for his safety. Consequently, he used the knife in self-defense, believing he would have lost his life that day if he hadn't. He also said that he discarded the knife due to fear and because he, quote, didn't want anything to do with that. My head was in a thick cloud. I couldn't understand what just happened. I was still trying to process everything. I was overwhelmed, end quote. He said that his heartbeat was high from what he had just went through and he knew his health was fragile, and again, he feared for what could have happened. He said that to this day, he still has nightmares about the incident. So those are kind of the key moments that happened during the trial. Again, I'm going to link a couple of videos down below from different testimonies and things like that if you guys want to dig deeper into that. But now let's talk about the closing statements. On April 10th, 2024, the prosecutors and the defense gave their closing arguments, and then on April 11th, the jury reached a verdict. Nicolae was found guilty of first-degree reckless homicide with a dangerous weapon, 4 counts of first-degree recklessly endangering safety with a dangerous weapon, and was also found guilty of battery with a dangerous weapon. Nicolae's sentencing is scheduled for July 31st of this year, so we will see what happens with that. According to prosecutor Carl Anderson, Nicolae can face up to 97 years in prison. He also said, quote, the jurors couldn't agree on intentional. They agreed unanimously that it was reckless, that he showed utter disregard for human life, end quote. Now, not a lot of the members of the jury have spoken out, but one juror who was 30 years old said, quote, the Madison Cohen battery charge was a really big thing for the whole case because that basically amounted to who threw the first punch. When did things get physical? And, we looked at that as it was his word against the other witnesses. There was no video of that. And after standing on the stand there and lying so much, even to the investigators as well, he admitted to pushing her away. And what others took as, was it a slap or a punch? We had more people that said he punched her, and we are forced to look purely at the evidence. So we went with that he had punched her, end quote. Now, the jury was made up of 6 women and 6 men, and they ranged from being 20 years old all the way up to 90 years old. They said that it was beneficial having the varying ages because it did provide different perspectives. The same juror who spoke out went on to describe what it was like to experience the 2-week trial and said that it was, quote, difficult, as jurors we are supposed to sit there and be emotionless and watch people get stabbed to death and their guts hanging out and all that. We actually physically saw all of the evidence. Some of the stuff wasn't televised. They passed out pictures and we looked at them. Some of it was very gruesome. It was hard to sit there and watch what happened and not say anything. You have questions as you're going through the whole thing and you can't ask a question, of of course. And it's all just emotional. I mean, it's stuff that I will never forget, end quote. Another juror who is in his 60s said that they think Nicolae going on the stand actually hurt him because, quote, the stories did not match up. There were so many things that were not true that he said. End quote. He also went on to say that although the American criminal justice system is nowhere near perfect, did the best that they could and that they just wanted justice to be served. Prosecutor Carl Anderson said that they are very satisfied with the verdict and even said, quote, the jury sat through 7 days of evidence. A key point in this case was Nicolae's own actions. After he stabbed all these people, he walked away. He ditched his knife. He didn't tell his group anything. Then he tried to get away. He pretended like he wasn't even involved. Then he gave a story to Lieutenant Hart that they pulled knives on him, and I think that's important for the jury to see what he thought, what was in his mind at the time, and whether it was actually self-defense. He knew he wasn't in fear for his life, but he had to embellish his story and say that others pulled knives on him and he took away their knife in order to justify it. So Nicolae knew that when he gave his interview that he was not justified, end quote. He also said that the victims' families were also pleased with the verdict and that Isaac's family is extremely relieved and they feel like Isaac got justice. On the other hand, Nicolae's defense said that they disagree with the verdict and that Nicolae is obviously sad and disappointed in the result and is contemplating the future of his life. As for how his wife Sondra feels about all of this, I mean, she hasn't really spoken out. She didn't really give that many statements. Yes, she testified at the trial, but we don't really know how she feels about this. But what we do know is that she actually divorced Nicolae in March of this year. But she said that she still loves him, but that all of this is just too much. So many lives were ruined and affected that day, and it's just really sad how everything escalated in just a matter of minutes. Like all these lives and all these injuries and divorces and heartbreak and, death, all of this happened in under 5 minutes. Like it's just insane. I know this video has been really long so far, and I will leave my resources down below if you guys want to do a deeper dive into this case. I definitely want to know what you guys think about this verdict. What would you guys do in this situation? There are so many, well, if only they had done this, or if only they had said this, and just what ifs in this situation. But unfortunately, it happened the way it happened, and Nicolae was found guilty. My heart goes out to the injured victims in this situation and to Isaac's family. I hope that Isaac's family is coping with his loss and that he is resting peacefully. He was only 17 years old. It's an incredibly tragic situation where everyone suffered, and it shouldn't have had to happen at all. I will keep you guys posted on his sentencing. Wow, it is just insane, the conversation around this case and how so many people are divided when it comes to this. I was reading some comments under the testimony videos and under, police interviews, etc., and the comments are just very intense. I saw one comment under AJ's testimony video where he was showing his scar to the audience, and someone put, quote, he has a big scar to remind him for the rest of his life to mind his own business, end quote. And then someone in the comments responded to that with, quote, I completely agree that scar should remind him that. It's not okay to bully someone. They have a right to protect themselves, end quote. There's a lot of comments similar to that where people feel that AJ and everyone else who got injured during this altercation deserved it because they basically, messed around and found out. They believe that if the teenager group and the Carlson group had just minded their own business, none of this would have happened. But because they decided to attack Nicolae and surround him and insult him and call him a pedophile and all of this stuff, that they basically got their karma and that the injuries that they got were well deserved. Now, while some people see the Carlson group and the teenagers as the villain in this case, there are a lot of people who also think that Nicolae is a villain and that he just took it way too far and that he got the verdict he deserved. People believe that just because he was being surrounded didn't mean that he had the right to pull out a knife and start stabbing people. That again, he could have just simply walked away and just moved on from this, or he could have warned the people hey, I have a weapon, back up, but he didn't. He just went right into stabbing people. So yeah, there's just a lot of division and controversy when it comes to this. So I would definitely love to know your opinions about this down below. I think what happened is just absolutely tragic. There was no need for this to happen. There was no need for this to escalate to this point. And I will never understand how it got to this and why these people had to get injured and why Isaac had to lose his life. It's just an overall very tragic case. And like I said, I will keep you guys posted on what happens with his sentence instinct. But yeah, again, I think that's pretty much all I have to say. Thank you all again so much for being here. If you guys are new to this channel, welcome, bienvenidos. I hope you guys can hit the subscribe button down below so you guys can join the familia. If you guys are already a part of La Familia, please don't forget to turn on the notifications so you guys don't miss out on any future videos. And yeah, I think that's pretty much all I have to say. I will see you all in the next video. Bye guys.